Yes, you're welcome to this module for today. And our module for today is public and private procurement. Yes, before we continue with our lesson for today, my name is Mr. Lomeriga Ivan Apollo. I will be the course coordinator of this program, of this module, that is public and private procurement. Yes. What Yes, before we continue, let's look at the module description. Yes, this module provides an in-depth understanding of the procurement process in both public and private organizations. So, students will learn about procurement planning, vendor selection, contract negotiation, and contract management in both private and public organizations or public sector. So also this module will cover the legal and ethical considerations of procurement and explore emerging trends and innovations in the field of procurement or the public procurement activities. Yes, well, let's continue to the learning objectives. So by the end of this module, our students will be able to understand the procurement process both in the public sector and the private sector organizations. The students will also be able to develop an effective procurement plans and strategies for their organizations or companies that they are working in, or be it in the private sector or the public sector. So students will be also able to evaluate vendor selection and negotiation techniques when undertaking the procurement in either the public sector or the private sector. Students will also gain knowledge of how to manage contracts effectively and also analyze legal and ethical considerations in procurement or, procurement of goods in both the private sector and the uh, public sector. So also, at the end of this module, students will be able to identify emerging trends and innovations in procurement management in both the private and the public sector. So let's introduce ourselves to uh, the module. Yes. So it should be noted that governments exist in every country and influence business performance. So when we talk of government, we simply refer to a public undertaking which is supposed to work for all people in a country. Hence, government undertakings are the ones we refer as public sector activities. So what are the activities that are involved in the public sector? One, that is the constructions of infrastructure, that is the roads, the bridges, the hospitals, those are the health centers. And now, under when you in the public sector, when you need to construct the roads, there is procurement that is needed to take place because you need to acquire this uh, supplier or a vendor for this specific activity. When be it construction of the roads, the power stations, these are done by the government. So, governments are purchasers of works, supplies, and services from the open market, uh, placing their demands alongside those of the private sector. So the government or buys these goods or the works or the services from the private sector. So, what is public procurement? Public procurement is the process through which the government acquires or buys goods, services, and works from the private sector. So, in other words, public sector refers to organizations owned and controlled by the government. When when the government wants to construct roads or street lights, they will come to the private sector where those service providers are, and they purchase these goods from them. So the aim of the public sector procurement is to provide public services, often free at the point of delivery. For example, the national health services or the government who has a lot of hospitals, they construct these hospitals such that they can provide health services to its citizens. Then national defense. So the government may undertake a public procurement or for security purpose to bring peace in the country. So this kind of procurement may involve buying weapons, that is for, for training of army. This can also involve this can also involve buying trucks for the army. It can also involve contracting an expert from other countries to come and train the army. So these are other activities that are done by the government or in the public or procurement sector. So public sector procurement is governed by the public procurement rules. In most countries, there is a law that governs the procurement of goods, services, and works with public funds. So these rules set the basis for managing procurement and the various methods permitted under different circumstances. So public procurement must also adhere to certain principles. For example, the principle of fairness, the principle of transparency, impartiality, all accountability and integrity. All these principles guide the public procurement activities. These principles aim at obtaining or gaining value for money. We shall look at these principles in the coming topics. So at the moment, let's introduce ourselves to the private and public sector procurement. So the items involved in public procurement range from simple goods or services such as cleaning services to large commercial projects such as development of infrastructures like roads, power stations, and airports. On the other hand, we can talk about the private sector procurement. Private sector procurement, this is the procurement of goods, services, and works by the private organizations or individuals, usually for fulfillment of a number of their objectives, including for purposes of investment, for purposes of resale or direct consumption. So, in other words, private sector procurement, this is the procurement or this is the process of obtaining goods, services, and works by the private organization. So the private sector is driven by one major objective of profit maximization. So all the procurement that is undertaken in the private sector, the main aim is to gain profits. That's why companies under the private sector, they always opt to reduce costs. They don't want to spend a lot of money when they are obtaining some goods because this one will affect their profit margin. Whereas that one is not the same case with public procurement. Public procurement aims at providing services to its citizens or providing services to the people. So let's talk about the scope of public procurement. Or in the public procurement, we have the central government. This comprises of the ministries which provide vital services to its citizens regardless of their incomes. So these services may include education, health, security, transport, and works. Under this, the transport and works to involve constructions of roads, constructions of bridges, and maintenance of the roads, such that the roads are in good condition. So the other part is the local government. The local government, this this provides similar services, the goods and works at a local level. For example, the local government can be under, in the case of South Sudan, can be under the states. So all in the states, they also undertake procurement because they want to obtain goods and services that can fulfill their requirements to provide services to its people in the state. Then another part is the public-owned service providers. So these are established by Act of Parliament to provide services, e.g., the National Examination Board, which is whose, which is mandated to oversee national examination and looking at providing quality and guiding policies and rules for students or schools when they are undertaking their activities. So, in other words, the National Examination Board, this is a government body that is aimed at guiding schools on education. Then another thing is the National Revenue Authority, that is another government body that is tasked to collect taxes and revenues for the government. Then also we have, in the case of South Sudan, also we have University of Juba, that is a national institution created by the government to undertake its activities for the purpose of the country or the people of its country. Yes, we can look at the importance of public and private procurement in economic development. Public and private procurement plays vital roles in economic development, and these are some of the importance of of public and private procurement. One, we have infrastructure development. Public procurement is crucial for the construction and development of infrastructures such as roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, and public utilities. These investments create jobs, stimulate economic activity, and enhance the overall quality of life. So, under infrastructure development, government would like to construct the roads, and here comes in the procurement process to obtain the vendor or the supplier or the contractor who will undertake that activity. So that is one of the importance of public and private sector procurement. Another is local industry development. Government procurement can support the growth and development of local industries by awarding contracts to domestic companies. So governments can stimulate local manufacturing, encourage entrepreneurship, and foster the growth of small and medium enterprises. Yeah, because the government wants to, the government is the buyer and the private sector is the seller, then the government will promote the domestic companies by giving these companies contracts, or be it or construction of the roads or constructions of bridges, hospitals. This can be done by the local companies. So the government is the employer, or it gives out job employment opportunities to domestic or, or local industry. So therefore, the government helps in developing the local industries. Yes, another point is market stability. Public procurement provides a stable and predictable market for goods and services, especially during economic downturns. Consistent demand from the public sector can help businesses stabilize their operations and maintain their workforce, contributing to economic stability. Yeah, because the government wants to provide services, uh, consistent services to its people, then it gives room, or it creates market for the private sector. Therefore, the market can be balanced because there will be demand for services and goods in the market. Another point is technology transfer and innovation. Public procurement provides projects. Public procurement projects often involve the adoption and integration of new technologies and innovative solutions. So this promotes technology transfer, knowledge sharing, and capacity building, leading to the advancement of industries and the economy as a whole. So because the technology is evolving every day, and because of the cooperation and collaboration between the private sector and the public sector, so there will be a technological transfer between the public sector and the private sector. Yes, let's look at the differences between the private sector and the public sector. The public and private sectors differ in various aspects, including their procurement processes. The procurement process in the private sector differs from the procurement process in the public sector. We shall look at this in the following topics, but for now, let's first see the differences between the public and the private sector. One, talk about the objectives. In in the private sector, usually they focus to increase profit, while in the public sector, they usually focus to achieve defined service levels. So, because the main aim of the businesses under the private sector or the companies or organizations under the private sector, their main aim is to maximize profit. So their own objective at the end of the day is to make profits and grow. But no, in the public sector or in the government settings, usually their focus is to achieve a defined service level. If it means if they want their roads to be constructed, then they will they will look at constructing the roads. They will not look at how much and they have spent on the roads, but they will look at the construction of the roads, construction of hospitals, and some other items at hand. Then responsibility. In the private sector, buyers are responsible to directors, who in turn are responsible to shareholders, while in the public sector, buyers are responsible ultimately to the general public. So responsibility when you are undertaking procurement activity in the private sector, you are accountable for your dealing by the director. You will have to explain whatever you have done in, or you have to report to the directors. But in the public sector, you will be responsible to the general public. You have to you have to prove to the general public about the services and the expenditure that have gone in a particular procurement activity under public procurement. Then legal restrictions. In the private sector, activities are regulated by company law, employment law, and product liability laws. But in the public sector, most of these laws apply equally, but additional regulations are present too, e.g., compulsory competitive tendering. So, in the public sector, they will recommend for competitive tendering when you are sourcing for a supplier. But in the private sector, there are many methods of procurement that are available, so they can determine to choose any method according to the policy or according to the procurement in question. So they may go for direct procurement, they may go for single sourcing, they may go for request for proposals or request for quotations. So all these are available in the private sector. Another another difference is competition. In the private sector, there is usually strong competition between many different firms. As you already know, there are very many companies which provide the same services. So the rate of competition under private sector is very high. So this one ends up, or the public sector ends up gaining quality services because of the rate of competition. While in the public sector, there is usually no competition. There is no competition because the government cannot compete by itself. Instead, it will just look at it will look at service delivery rather than competition. Yes. Another difference between the two sectors in the private, there is a publicity. So in the private sector, confidentiality applies in dealing between suppliers and buyers. So in the private sector, the level of confidentiality is too high. Uh, or there is non-disclosure of information between the supplier and the buyers, while in the public sector, confidentiality is limited because of public interest to disclosure. So whatever is going on in the public sector should be publicly uh, announced, and it should be publicly known by everyone, by all the people in the given, if be it in the state or a nation. So here the level of confidentiality is low under public sector procurement. So information exchange. In private sector, buyers do not exchange information with other firms because of confidentiality and competition. While in the public sector, buyers are willing to exchange notes freely. So those are a few differences between the private sector and the public sector. And I know those few points can help you and guide you to understand the public sector and the private sector procurement. So let's look at the similarities. Yes. While there are there are distinct differences between public procurement and private procurement, there are also some similarities in terms of certain principles and practices. So what are the similarities? Procurement objectives. Yes, we talked of the objectives, the objectives of procurement or public procurement is to provide services to its people, and the objective of private procurement sector, that is to maximize profit. So both public and private procurement share the common objective of acquiring goods, works, or services to meet specific needs or requirements. So whether it's a government entity or a private company, the procurement process aims to fulfill organizational goals and support operational activities. So at the end of the day, both the private and the public procurement, they all want to acquire the goods and services for their needs. So if they are going to, if in the public, they want to maximize profits, but the first thing is to acquire these goods that will make them acquire this profit. Then also, if the public, if their main objective is to attain a certain level of services, but all they need to acquire the goods and services that will make them attain that service, or that service level that they want to attain. So both of them, they have common objective of acquiring goods and services. Then supplier selection. In both public and private procurement, the process involves the selection of suppliers or vendors to provide the required goods or services. So this typically includes assessing suppliers, assessing supplier qualifications, evaluating proposals or bids, and choosing the most suitable supplier based on predetermined criteria. So both, no, because they have different procurement process, but still both of them need to select the right supplier for the goods in question in both the public and the private sector. So both of them need to assess the suppliers. They need to evaluate the proposals or the bids, and at the end they select their suitable supplier. So both of them, they have supplier selection. Then there is value for money. Both public and private procurement seek to achieve value for money. So, so in other words, value for money, I can explain it as the maximum satisfaction, mm, that is derived from consuming a certain good or a service. So both of these entities, the private or the public sector, they want to achieve some level of consumption from consuming some good or after spending their money. So this means obtaining the best possible combination of quality, price, and other relevant factors in the procurement process. Both sectors aim to optimize their purchasing decisions to determine benefits and minimize costs. So both of these companies, they want to attain some quality, the good quality, the price, and the quantity according to the factors that they align, they put forward. So both these private and public procurement seek to attain value for money. Then another point is contract management. Both public and private procurement involves contract management. Once the procurement process is completed and a supplier is selected, a contract is typically established to formalize the relationship and outline the rights and obligations of both parties. So both in the public and the private sector, they need to undertake, they need to monitor and manage the contract and review the performance of the contract such that at the end of the day there should be work done other than making loss for the organization or the company. So another one is risk management. Both public and private procurement require managing risks associated with the procurement process. So this includes identifying potential risks, implementing mitigation strategy, and establishing mechanisms to address unforeseen circumstances that may impact the procurement outcomes. So in both the public and the private procurement, there should be a risk management strategy. So this helps to identify the potential risk associated in the procurement process, because both in the public and the private sector, to avoid loss and issues like corruption and loss of funds. Yes. So this marks the end of our first topic, the introduction to public and private sector procurement. So our next topic will be oh, the procurement process in the private, sorry, in the public sector procurement. So before we conclude, we shall also talk about the ethical and legal considerations. So in both public and the private procurement, they should adhere to ethical standards and legal requirements. So both sectors need to ensure fairness, transparency, and integrity in their procurement process. They must comply with applicable laws, regulations, and code of conduct to promote good governance and prevent corruption or unethical practices. So corruption is in both sectors, in the public and the private sector. So in the public So there should be ethical and legal considerations in both sectors. Then is supplier relationship management. Establishing and maintaining positive relationship with suppliers is important in both public and private procurement. Effective supplier relationship management includes communication, collaboration, and ongoing evaluation of supplier performance. So managing suppliers is done in both the private and the public sector because you need to have more information regarding your supply chains. You need to be having what we call continuous supply of products or goods and or supplies for your organization or your company. So this one needs supply relationship such that you can be updated on any information regarding the, the goods or services that you want. So I will request to end there for this uh, first topic for today. So we shall meet in the following topics. Thank you.